Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Batman Forever from 1995. I'm putting out this review on the actual 20th anniversary of the release of Batman Forever. Batman Forever was a movie that really dominated the summer of 1995 for me. Not because it was good or I saw it more than once or like a reason that would make sense to most people. I just didn't get to see it till the end of the summer and really wanted to see it and bought the soundtrack, and so it kind of infected my entire summer. Anytime they'd show a clip from it or a making of, I would have to watch it. I was a big comic book fan then, so any sort of comic book movie was of interest to me. So feeling like this movie was 20 years old made me semi-interested in maybe having a look back, and also realizing how it's kind of just the most forgotten of all Batman movies. It's not a Tim Burton Batman movie, it's not the horrendousness of Batman and Robin, it's not a Chris Nolan Batman movie, it's not Mask of the Phantasm. It really doesn't have anything now. Nobody cares about it. It's not very well remembered, and not even in an ironic, silly way. It's just kind of like, oh, that was a big movie, I guess. It had a mixed reaction from critics, but most normal people I talked to really liked Batman Forever. They found it to be a rejuvenation in a franchise that they didn't really like Batman Returns, and they're happy that it had gone in more of a lighter, lighthearted, and more fun summer movie thrill ride kind of a way. And that kind of rejuvenated the franchise for a little bit. They would end up wasting that rejuvenation on the next one completely. But for a little bit, people kind of liked Joel Schumacher making Batman Forever. Batman Forever kind of reminds me of a time 20 years ago when I was 11 years old, and this movie was the biggest movie of the summer of 1995. The only film that grossed more than this film did in America was Toy Story, and that didn't come out in the summer, that came out in the fall. So Batman Forever was the biggest movie of the summer, and it's odd to look back at it because of how unremarkable it is of all the Batman films. Of the four, it's kind of interesting because the first two are kind of remarkable in their set design and Tim Burton's vision, and that they actually made big screen Batman movies. And Batman Forever, in its blandness and its general idea that all comic books are goofy and colorful, is both insulting, behind the times, and very much of its time in 1995 is a very studio engineered to be massive summer blockbuster. Batman is fighting Two-Face, who is doing various crimes around Gotham. During the opening crime, Batman meets Dr. Chase Meridian, who is a criminal psychologist who instantly falls in love with Batman. And then they're going out and stuff, and she also likes Bruce Wayne. And then Two-Face is killing people, and then he goes to a circus. Yeah, this makes no sense. He goes to a circus to kill people because Bruce Wayne's there and stuff, and then the Flying Graysons are there, and he sort of kills Dick Grayson's family, and then Dick Grayson lives with Bruce Wayne, but also Edward Nygma, the Riddler, played by Jim Carrey, is around, and he becomes the Riddler, and he has this thing that makes TVs 3D and then goes into your mind and can read people's minds. But why does that make like TV 3D? That part doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter. Batman has to stop him, and Robin has to help him, and Robin wants to kill Two-Face, and yeah, I don't know. It's about a lot of things. The reason Batman Forever is the way it is because of Batman Returns. Batman Returns did not do as well as the original Batman. In fact, it very much did not do as well as the original Batman. Its sets were excessive. Tim Burton's direction was excessive. Warner Brothers didn't like it. They didn't sell as many toys because it was dark and scary. I was a kid when Returns came out, and I bought all the toys anyway. It didn't really seem to bother me, but it bothered a lot of people, and it wasn't as commercially successful. Warner Brothers politely asked Tim Burton to leave, or paid him off and let him be a producer on this one, or at least get the producer credit as kind of a vanity thing, and I'm sure he got some percentage points or something. So Warner Brothers looked for a new director to kind of basically reboot the franchise. This is kind of one of the reboots before we called them reboots kind of franchises. And they got Joel Schumacher, who basically Warner Brothers wanted him because he had a history of being studio friendly and getting his movies on budget and on time, and that seemed to be pretty much their studio-friendly requirements. Joel Schumacher makes a lot of claims that he wanted to make Batman Year One and do this darker stuff, and that he was a fan of the Batman comics, yet his direction does not really actually say that. He claims to be inspired by the 60s Batman TV show, which again doesn't make me think he was a fan of the comics. Also the Dick Sprang era, which is not a joke, that's actually an illustrator who did Batman for a while. What he basically does in this film, he does this wackier, crazier, more colorful direction. He does the thing that a lot of directors would do with comic books, where you could tell they didn't really know much about comic books, and they're like, well, look at the colors, look at how they do panels, I should make it look all comic booky. Certainly Marvel's films look like comic books, and you can translate comic books to cinema, we know that now, but stupider directors, what they would do is just make it look all goofy and silly, because comic books are for kids, and they're smarter than that, even though they're Joel Schumacher and they make shitty movies. This film that is very much directed in a way that's talking down to comic book fans, like acting like you like color and how this action works and how silly it is, and really just showing the kind of disrespect that you used to be used to with a comic book film. That's kind of how Joel Schumacher directs it. He very much does it here, regardless of respecting your source material or respecting comic books. It just comes off as kind of a lazy, like, I just flipped through a bunch of shit and came up with this idea. It's not really a good theory, it's a stupid theory, and the whole direction decisions behind this film was to make the most studio-friendly kind of movie you could, most poppy, audience-friendly, to have a big box office opening weekend. And by the way, this film did. It had the biggest box office opening weekend of all time at the time in 1995. I think it was about $50 million, which now is not as big of a deal, but in 1995 this was the biggest opening weekend of all time, and they totally engineered this to be that kind of a movie. Oftentimes we talk about how Hollywood's very sexist and racist in terms of its casting. This film has more of examples of that than most films I can think of. First off, when this film was going to be directed by Tim Burton and star Michael Keaton, and when he was, Rene Russo was going to play the part of Dr. Chase Meridian, which would eventually go to Nicole Kidman. The reason she lost it was because Keaton left, and once they cast Val Kilmer, Rene Russo was deemed too old to play Val Kilmer's love interest, so they fired her. I think they just paid her off maybe, but she was gone for a much younger actress, which is a pretty shitty thing to do. You could say they didn't have chemistry, and maybe there's a different reason for that, so sure, whatever. Then you get to Robin. Now, Robin was originally cast as Marlon Wayans. He was actually cast for Batman Returns. They didn't actually use him, and I think he got paid for that movie without having to do any work, and then they actually paid him off and paid off his contract when they cast Chris O'Donnell. Why they went through all the trouble of casting Marlon Wayans as Robin and doing all that is just kind of baffling. Marlon Wayans actually recently said he still gets residuals from Batman Forever because of this contract nonsense, which is a bizarre situation, but they felt they wanted a white Robin. Same thing with Tommy Lee Jones and Two-Face. Tommy Lee Jones was very hot at the time. He had just done and won an Oscar for The Fugitive. He had done The Client, also with Joel Schumacher, and which is why Joel Schumacher wanted him. However, Billy D. Williams was cast as Harvey Dent in the original Batman film and actually signed on because in his contract it said that he would be given first choice to play Two-Face in a sequel, and that's why he did Harvey Dent. He wanted to play Two-Face, and they actually would not let him. They bought his contract out, and then of course Tommy Lee Jones would play Two-Face. Now this is before they actually gave a shit about continuity. It is interesting they just paid off two black actors who they had already cast so they can have quote-unquote hotter, whiter actors in this movie. It's kind of one of the more shitty examples of Hollywood. Now, one of the cast members I really have not talked about is Jim Carrey. Now, Jim Carrey was one of the biggest stars in the world at the time of the release of this film. 1994 was one of the biggest years of his entire career. He released 3 movies: Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, and The Mask in one fucking year. He was a huge celebrity and a huge star, and his follow-up movie was this movie. He definitely helped this film outgross Batman Returns. He was probably the biggest box office draw of anyone in this film at the time, and I'm not exaggerating. He has a higher emphasis in this film. In fact, the Two-Face character is not very well developed. He's just kind of a crazy villain. It's honestly the Riddler's movie. I kind of am mixed about Val Kilmer as Batman. I both like him as Bruce Wayne, and I think had he been in a better Batman movie, I think we would think differently about him. Val Kilmer kind of has like a darkness about him. He kind of works in that Michael Keaton vein. He's semi-fondly remembered but mostly forgotten because it's not an amazing performance. I don't think it's as distinctive as Keaton. They very much wanted this movie to be a hit, and I think Warner Brothers really manufactured a hit film. They got hot actors, Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones. Nicole Kidman was certainly a celebrity. Chris O'Donnell was semi-recognizable, but it's really not made to be anything more. It's not made to be a good detective story or a good Batman story. It's just made to be a big summer movie. This film is adhering to more of the everyman's knowledge of what Batman was at that time, which was still the 60s TV show. The 60s TV show's influence still loomed large at this point, especially the line where Robin jokingly says, "Holy rusted metal, Batman," which is a lame joke, but this movie goes for it. It's adhering to that, and it's kind of just giving everyone what they really wanted from Batman. They're like, oh, I don't like this Batman, he's too dark. And this movie got into that, and that's why people kind of liked it more. But you can tell, like, the times changed against Batman Forever. This was a very of the moment kind of Batman movie. I will say most Batman movies are of the moment, but I don't think as much as this one was. Schumacher really cared about being current, so much so that it just overwhelmed itself. The reason this movie's forgettable is that there's nothing really to latch onto. It's not Batman, and it's not really about him being a detective. It's just about them just wowing you on surface level bullshit. I remember when I actually got to see this movie, I'd waited all summer, and it finally got to the cheap theater towards the end of August, and my dad finally agreed to take me to see Batman Forever, because for some reason we could only see movies at the cheap theater, so it took forever to see anything. And we saw it, and I remember saying, well, it was good for a comic book movie. And that might sound weird today, because you have like good movies that are comic book movies. And at the time, what I meant by that was that comic book movies were not good. They were made by people who didn't get it, but everyone kind of accepted that they were made by people who didn't get it. Like, if you made Batman Forever today, people would be pretty pissed off. In 1995, you could do that, and we'd all kind of accept, like, yeah, he's not going to get it, but they won't get it for a while, so I'm just going to, like, let this go. I don't remember liking it that much, but I remember being fine about it. I'm sure I liked it just because I got to go to a movie, but it was good for a comic book movie at the time. But things have changed, and looking at what Marvel's done, looking at even what Chris Nolan's done, this movie's just not really that great. It's not very memorable. There aren't any really great sequences in it. The only thing I really like from the soundtrack is the Method Man song and the Flaming Lips song. The rest of it's garbage, and it just like doesn't age well. Why were there nipples on the fucking bat suits? That's weird. It really wanted to be Batman of the moment, of the summer of 1995, and it was my summer of 1995 until I saw it, and then it was kind of like I didn't think about it that much. I saw it again on video, and I remember really not liking it, going like, why did we put Batman in this direction? Like, why did we need a brighter Batman? It was a whole miscalculation on what to do with the character. I call bullshit on Joel Schumacher and Warner Brothers for retreating and saying, oh, well, we wanted to do this dark thing. And you could say Schumacher's Batman movies are probably the only two Batman movies not based on something Frank Miller wrote, which in itself, I guess, is refreshing if these movies weren't so horrible. Batman Forever was just unremarkable in its terribleness. It was interesting to go back and see a big studio film from that era, but it's not really interesting to watch at all. This is not even good ironically, it's just a bad movie. Joel Schumacher didn't have any respect for it. That he says he likes comic books is just like throwing salt on the fucking wound. He doesn't like comic books. He just likes throwing a lot of color filters and saying like, look, comic books are colorful. It's like this, I don't know, I'm a piece of shit. And that's kind of Batman Forever. People misunderstanding their subject matter and having no respect for it. And you know, in 95, people would put up with that. But thank God the fucking 90s are over. Every time I was sitting through this, I was like, God, the 90s were stupid. I just wanted to revisit this movie 20 years later and see what it looked like now. And what it looked like now is fucking ugly. So if you have seen Batman Forever and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. This isn't part of a series. I just wanted to rewatch Batman Forever, and I deeply regret it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.